All day recorded somewhere. Just searching.
Good afternoon. Boa tarde. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon and for coming and joining us in this great journey that we're about to start. Então, super obrigada por terem vindo aqui hoje. Super agradeço a todo mundo por estar aqui e por vocês terem tirado um tempo, né, na tarde de vocês, na tarde de quinta-feira, para participar junto com a gente e com o Mark Church. Muito obrigada. Se vocês precisarem de tradução, hoje eu vou pedir para as nossas tradutoras levantarem a mão. Tenho a Elina, a Patrícia, a Luciana e o Márcio, que vão estar à sua disposição para traduzir qualquer coisa que vocês precisarem. A gente pediu para as pessoas que precisassem de tradução para ficarem nessas mesas aqui da segunda fileira e essas mesas que têm cadeiras vermelhas. Então, a gente vai colocar sempre a pessoa que vai estar responsável pela tradução dentro desses espaços, dentro dessas mesas, para que todo mundo consiga entender a apresentação de hoje. Inclusive a parte que eu vou continuar falando em inglês. So it's with great honor and with great pleasure that we welcome Mark Church for the third time to our school. He came the first time back in January when we were first starting, actually before we started our school, and he participated in initiating the journey of thinking with all of us at Escola Concept. And then he came back in June to see our development, to see how we had progressed into developing this culture of thinking, and to see how our teachers and our learners had evolved throughout the process. And then he comes back now in October, as we're getting ready to finish up the school year, as we're getting ready to wrap everything up, to see how we're going to be ending this journey. So Mark, when he comes, he participates really closely with all of our teachers and with all of our learners. He visits classrooms, he plans with our teachers, he observes the quality of questions, the depth of responses, and he gathers a lot of data that then we use to reflect upon and to improve upon our practices. So a lot of parents, a lot of you have asked us so many times, well, what is this culture of thinking? What are visible thinking routines? What does it mean to be a part of a culture of thinking? What does it mean to be in a school where teaching and understanding are really valued? And to make this clearer for all of you who unfortunately are not part of our classrooms and our learning spaces every day, we wish you were, but we had your children with us, and we hope to have the children of others of you who still haven't enrolled. We invited Mark to explain to you and to put this into practice. So today you will be learners in this journey. Today you will be students. And you will learn what does it mean to experience a visible thinking routine. And what does it mean for us to dive deeper into thinking. So that is why Mark Church is here with us today. So it's with great pleasure, Mark Church is the co-author of Making Thinking Visible and an amazing colleague and friend who we've now been working together for a while. And it's with great pleasure, great honor that we welcome him to spend this next hour with you. So thank you, Mark.
Good afternoon. Have you had a nice day? That didn't sound convincing. Have you had a nice day? Or what do you want to say? If you didn't have a nice day, maybe you should say something. But no, it is my pleasure to really to be able to talk with all of you this afternoon. Just for 60 minutes. To think about this idea of fostering a culture where thinking can thrive. Where some of these ideas grow legs here with the colleagues that are really shepherding your children and being good teachers for them. So it's just an hour talk of sorts, but to give you a little teaser, so maybe that helps make sense for some of you who've already been here at the school, or those of you who are looking at the school. Maybe this just helps add to the perspective you have in terms of what the school is doing with your children. Yeah, but maybe I should not just start in. Why don't you turn and talk to the table very quickly? Why you? Why this? What brought you here? You could be doing anything else this afternoon, but somehow you landed here. So just quickly talk at your table, just with one person next to you. What brought you here? Why is this even of interest to you? So you talk with each other.
Aí tá sendo de conforto, né? Marcia. This one. Yeah. Os pequenos têm os maiores têm parâmetros para ótimo. Na verdade, a gente sabe que cada uma tem o seu jeito, né? Acho que essa vai ser a habilidade de eles sabem que cada um
So friends, could I jump back in here? So let's come back together as a whole group if we can. How many of you already have children here in the school? How many of you are, your children will be coming next year, or you're thinking about the school? Okay, so we're a nice mixed group here. So whether you already have children here, or you have children that you're thinking about sitting here or that will be coming here. One thing that I've really enjoyed about my interactions with Concept School in St. Paul, as well as to some of the other campuses of this organization, I think it says a lot about a school when they invest in their teachers as learners. Hiring good teachers that are well qualified, that have a lot of expertise, of course, that's really important. having an ongoing commitment to their ongoing learning. I mean, I'm very biased. I think that's a great thing. You know, we expect other professionals to continue to learn, and there's more to learn. And the quality of learning, can you get my seat? Come on up. Oh, now she doesn't like you, Ricardo, because the seat was right there. I'm so sorry. Welcome. What I want to say here is, you know, the quality of learning that happens in any classrooms can't exceed the quality of the people who lead that learning, right? So if you're going to make an investment, you want high quality learning for your kids, one thing I always think is, okay, well, what kind of learning do the teachers do? How are they protecting that investment? How are they growing that investment, right? Because my child isn't just a cog in the machine. My child is a living being with ideas, with thoughts, with questions. And where is there space for that to happen? How do these teachers, with their expertise, take their lead from the children in front of them, right? How is this school a culture that really sends messages to the children? You're not blank. You already have a lot of ideas in your head. And that matters to us. We have a lot to teach you, but if we can understand what you're understanding, we can teach you and teach you well, right? And this whole idea of culture, I'll just say this about, or right here from this front. We think about paying attention to the culture because culture sends those messages. Anybody in this room, let me ask this question. Anybody in this room ever live in a place or travel to a place that's different than where you grew up? Yeah, I know some of you had holidays in the States, I've heard that, right? But other places, right? You don't have to be in a new culture very long, and you start to get a sense, oh, this is important here. These people love this here. These people talk about this here. These people celebrate this here, right? These people are crazy about this here. You don't have to be in a new culture very long, and you start to get the message. This is important. It can be very similar to back home. It could be very different, but that's the power of culture. And the same thing happens in schools. Children come into the classroom, and right from the first day, they're trying to figure out what gets celebrated here, what gets talked about here, what's important here, right? Because they're living in classrooms day after day, these cultures in the classroom. So sometimes kids could get the message, dear learner, please keep your mouth quiet and do what I say. How do they get that message? Well, because that's what they're experiencing every day. Okay? But at Concept, from what I understand, the teachers don't want to send that message. The teachers want to send the message, dear learner, what's inside your head matters. The connections you're making, what you're looking closely at, the questions you have, those are important to us. Well, then the question for the concept teachers will be, how do they make sure that they live that message day after day and live it in the culture? So there's kind of an interesting question to look into here, I think. And so let me ask you this. How old are your children? How old? You have a 4-year-old. Just show me by your hand. Just be careful with which pictures you have. Okay, so your child is 6, your child is 8, your child is 5. Have you ever thought about your child when they are your age? Have you ever thought about your 8-year-old as a 48-year-old? Here's the question that I would love to just push into this group for a moment. What do we wish these children in our care to be like when they're our age? Don't picture your 5-year-old right now. Picture your 5-year-old when she is 50. Picture your 4-year-old when he's 44. What do you wish him to be like when he's 44? Try to talk with your people that you just made friends with. What's on your list? What do you wish them to be like when they're your age? Talk with your neighbor and then I'm going to get some ideas. They will be your age. Let me join in with you if I may. So, what's on your wish list? What do we wish these children in our care to be like when they're adults? What's one thing that you wish them to be like? What was one thing? To what? The capacity to build, to develop, to grow, open to change, something like that. What's something else on your wish list? Happy. Something else. Confident. Something else. Self-confidence. Respect for others.
Care for the others and for themselves.
Care for others and for self. Something else. I'm sorry. Creative. Make a difference in the world. Contribute. Have some impact. Yeah. Curious. High self-esteem. Integrity. This is a pretty good list. And who says that Brazilian parents don't dream for their children? Of course you dream. Nobody says that. Nobody says that. You know, I've been asking teachers this question in many places. What do you wish the children you teach to be like as adults? I've been asking parents this in many, many places. What do you wish the children in your care to be like when they're your age? The kinds of things you were just sharing and the kinds of things you see on the screen, those things come up an awful lot. That's not just a Brazilian list, right? These are the kinds of things that people often say, you know, creative, innovative, self-managed, compassionate, open to new ideas, right? This list, in many ways, represents what we call dispositions. We want them to have the habit of these long into their adulthood. Theodore Sizer, he is since deceased, but he was the dean of the Graduate School of Education at Harvard University a number of years ago. I believe he was at some other university as well. He used to talk about this list, this wish list. He used to call this kind of list the residuals of education. When everything else has gone away, what's left? This is a different kind of goal, because this is a goal towards the long term. Who do we wish the children we teach, who do we wish the children we raise to be like when they're our age, right? Now, some of these things on this list, empathy, for example, collaboration, those kinds of things, those are very social habits, right? That's how people function with one another. That's very good for adults, it's good for children. Some of those things are persistent, self-directed, responsible. Those are good work habits. right? We want the children to become the adults that have good social habits. We want them to become the children into adulthood that have good work habits. And then some of those things like skeptical or reflective or seeks connection or perspective seeking, those are all thinking habits, right? Now, some of you may want your children to be doctors or lawyers or, whatever profession you want. What does this have to do with being a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher or an academic? Well, nothing, but everything. The big question will be, how do schools help them get there? I can tell you, I know a lot of schools that don't think about the long goal. It's all, what do we need to cover? What material do we need to deliver? What examinations do we need to sit? Well, that is the goal of school too. But for a school to say, and I believe this is what I'm understanding about concepts, not only do we want to think about the here and now learning, but what's the long later learning, right? Now, children, who they become as adults, that's much more than just what the school contributes, right? You play a big part of that. The community, the society plays a part of that, right? There's a lot of contributing factors. But the question for the concept teachers is, if these are the habits that we want the children to grow into, how do we create a culture that puts those habits, those dispositions into practice? Right? Because having a wish list is one thing, but if the wish list isn't lived, well then it's just a poster on the wall, right? It's just a wish list. One of the things that we talk about is if we wish children to grow into those habits, we have to think, how do we enculturate these habits? Vygotsky, the psychologist Russian from more than 100 years ago, he says, children grow into the intellectual life around them. He says, it's a truism of parenting. The children we have, they learn what they live with. Has anybody had the experience in this room where you've got your baby at home? Maybe 4 years later, you're stuck in traffic, you're late, you're stressed, and your voice comes out of your 4-year-old's mouth. Did anybody have that experience? Have you ever had your voice come out of your child's mouth? Right? Children learn what they live with. Children start to talk about what we enculturate with them. Right? Children start to mimic our patterns. Children start to take on our language. Children take on our vocabulary. And so for the concept teachers, they're thinking so much about, well, what language do children hear while they're with us? What do we focus on? If we want these children to be persistent, if we want these children to be hardworking, if we want these children to be curious, then how does that roll off our tongue over and over and over again? A big part of enculturation is this. Enculturation, it's the process of gradually internalizing the messages. This is important here. Every day's experience will send a message. Persistence, curiosity, wondering, creativity, that matters. That will get internalized only if these children live this day after day after day. Another part of enculturation is this internalization. It takes time, right? We have to be clear. This is the values we want. These are the messages we want. My association with concept has been pretty clear. We want them to be hardworking. We want them to take measured risks. We want children who have confidence. We want children who will collaborate. We want children who will be curious and wonder. They can say that all they want on your tours, but you have to look closely. How do they live it day after day after day? So my work with the teachers has been a lot, how do we take the list and put it into action? For example, how do we create this story of learning? If this is our list, then a big question here at this school has been, what tools and structures could we routinely inlay so that our children become persistent? What tools and structures do we put in place so that our children become creative or innovative or any of these things, reflective? Right? What tools or structures could we inlay so the kids get skills to do these things? Right? So that the kids feel motivated, the students feel inclined to do these things, they're encouraged to do these things. And most importantly, what kinds of tools or structures can we inlay so that students start to feel confident, this is the moment for me to be open-minded. This is the moment for me to be compassionate. This is the moment for me to be a friend. This is the moment for me to persist. Right? Giving the kids the skills to do it's one thing. Helping the students to know this is the moment to do that, that's another thing. So that's what we're doing here at Concept School and making thinking visible work. What kinds of routines do we start to put in place so that these kinds of things on the wish list come into action? Does that make sense for folks? Some of you who have been on the tour of the school, or some of you who have children here already, you've been seeing some things of thinking routines. See, think, wonder. What makes you say that? Color, symbol, image. Right? It's very easy for you to see the posters on the wall and see, oh, there's the see, think, wonder. There's the color, symbol, image. But what I'm hoping that you'll start to understand is these aren't just activities the teachers are doing to entertain your children. These are tools and structures that your teachers are using to help your kids grow these habits. That was a lot of talking at you. Why don't I go quiet for a moment? Why don't you talk at your table? What makes sense? What's helpful? What's useful for you? Turn and talk with your partners. What makes sense for you here? Stay after.
Diferentes tipos de pensamento, mas é justamente baseado no como
So friends, let me jump in with you for a second. So can we come back together, please? What I want to do, and this is just an hour talk, right? So in 60 minutes, it's we can get a little taster, but we can't have the whole talk. So we just kind of get into it. It's important to start with our wish list. If we want children to be that persistent, expressive, self-directed, creative, you may have heard the school say habits of mind. These are habits of mind. We want kids to do this when they are 4, and we want kids to do this when they are 10, and we want them to do that when they are 18, and we dream of them doing this when they're 48. Persistent, hardworking, thoughtful, reflective, compassionate. This list, starting with the wish list first, explains all of this work. If this is our wish list, how do we start to chip away at it? What tools do we put in place to help students become this? The thing about this list over here on the right, curiosity. Somebody said curious just a moment ago. I can't teach curiosity. I cannot go to the 10-year-olds and do 3 lessons on curiosity, and now we are all curious. It doesn't work that way. Perspective seeking, looking at things from many viewpoints. So many of your jobs as adults, you know that the person who can see many viewpoints, that really contributes to their success, right? Perspective seeking, looking at things from multiple viewpoints. I can't teach that. I can't teach that in 4 lessons, and now we all consider viewpoints. But rather, if I want curiosity, if I want perspective seeking, the question will always be, how do we live it? How do we put it in the culture? How do we have language for it? How do we have interactions for it? How is there time for it? How are there routines for it? This idea of routines is what I want to draw your attention to here for the last 30 minutes of our talk. Because sometimes people say, oh, routines, they're new, they're new, they're new. I would like to invite you to think, they're actually not so new. Anytime there's a behavior we want our children to get good at, we often put a routine in place so that they can follow the routine and get good at it. For example, after dinner, we have the tidying up routine. No, we don't all just run away from the dinner table. No. We do this with the dishes, we go to the kitchen and, whomever. And unless somebody does that for you, which I would like to come to your house then. Here's my number. I would love to have a holiday with you. But you see, or the going to bed routine, right? Okay, guys, at 8 p.m. or whatever time, screens go off, right? Then we brush our teeth, then we wash our face, then we start to make our way to bed, right? Parents put routines in place. If there's a behavior that you want, you start to put a routine in place. And you don't switch it every day, but you persist with it over and over and over again. Some days it's easy, some days not so easy, but there's power in routine. The same with us as adults. If we have a goal, I want a behavior, I want to live healthier, let's say, I start to put routines in place to help me get there. There's that, rather than thinking this is new, I want you to start thinking this is familiar. If there is a habit that we want, we start to put routines in place. So our work starts looking at thinking routines. If we want empathy, what kind of routine, what kind of tool will help people grow the habit of empathy? Perspective seeking. If we want them to become good perspective seekers, what kinds of routines can we put in place to help them get there? So I would like to practice with all of you what it feels like, as Priscilla mentioned out to you. Let's just practice a routine. First time through, it always feels a little funny the first time through because it's new. But it gives you a little hint of what we're trying to do with these thinking routines. So this routine I'd like to introduce you to is called main, side, hidden. It's the story routine. And it is a routine for uncovering complexity, depth of an incident, a document, an issue, an image. You're just going to do an experience, yeah, if you'll go there, yeah. And then you can start to get a feel for what this feels like. So let me talk to you as if you were my learners. One thing that I think is very important for us to get good at is every time we have an event, every time we have an issue in front of us, we have to be able to read the story. And often we have to read more than one story. So one thing that we want to start getting ourselves into a habit of is this. Anytime we have something in front of us, an issue, a concept, a dilemma, a complexity, we will always start asking ourselves, okay, what's the main story here? Right? The main story, the story that's right in front of my eyes. The main story on Sunday, Brazil will have an election. Is that true? Okay, so that's the main story. It's election day in this country. But just that story does not the whole picture paint. Often around that story comes side stories. So we will want to get into the habit of saying, what are some of the side stories here? Not the main story, but the stories around the side. We don't always see them up front, but they are there. If I want to understand Brazilian politics, what's the main story? It's election day. Okay, beyond that, what are the side stories? Do you see how my understanding could go deeper if I see the main story and the side stories? Even beyond that, we want to start asking ourselves, what's the hidden story here? Okay, the question, what are some hidden stories? The stories that give us the big picture, but we can't see with our eyes. Main, side, hidden. Main, side, hidden. If you could get that into a routine, I could start looking at traffic issue in Brazil, main, side, hidden. I could think Britain votes to leave the European Union, Brexit. Okay, that's the main story. But to understand it, we have to understand what are the side stories. And beyond that, what's the hidden story? Main, side, hidden. If you could do that, there's your depth. There's the complexity. Right? So let's practice. I'm going to share with you a story. It's going to be an audio clip but the words will come up on the screen as well, so you can follow along. This story comes from a series. In the United States, we have a series on one of our radio networks. The series is called This I Believe. They had this series 50 years ago. They asked the very famous people, what do you believe? Not religious belief, but more, what's your ethos? What drives you? Your philosophy, your personal philosophy. That was 50 years ago. They asked the politicians. In recent years, they brought the radio series back, This I Believe, but they're not asking the famous people now. They're asking ordinary people. What do you believe? What drives you? What's your philosophy? This story is called This I Believe. I believe in the connection between strangers. And this man, he's just a citizen. He just put this essay together. You're going to hear his voice, and you'll see the words on the screen as well to help you follow along. As you listen, I want you to go through a process. What would you say is the main story? What would you say are the side stories? What would you say is a hidden story? Shall we practice? Okay, let's listen.
In the essays we receive, we find that many recall a single moment when belief became clear. These moments may seem insignificant, but they reverberate afterwards and even become the basis of a life's credo. This is what happened to Miles Goodman of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a lawyer and Vietnam veteran. On June 23, 1970, I had just been mustered out of the Army after completing my one-year tour of duty in Vietnam. I was a 23-year-old Army veteran on a plane from Oakland, California, returning home to Dallas, Texas. I had been warned about the hostility many of our fellow countrymen felt toward returning non-vets at that time. There were no hometown parades for us when we came home from that unpopular war. Like tens of thousands of others, I was just trying to get home without incident. I sat in uniform in a window seat, chain smoking and avoiding eye contact with my fellow passengers. No one was sitting in the seat next to me, which added to my isolation. A young girl, not more than 10 years old, suddenly appeared in the aisle. She smiled, and without a word, timidly handed me a magazine. I accepted her offering, her quiet welcome home. All I could say was, thank you. I do not know where she sat down or who she was with, because right after accepting the magazine from her, I turned to the window and wept. Her small gesture of compassion was the first I'd experienced in a long time. I believe in the connection between strangers when they reach out to one another. That young girl undoubtedly has no memory of what happened years ago. I like to think of her as having grown up, continuing to touch others and teaching her children to do the same. I know she might have been told to give me the gift by her mother. Her father might still have been in Vietnam at that point, or maybe he had not survived the war. It doesn't matter why she gave me the magazine. The important thing is, she did. Since then, I have followed her example and tried in different ways for different people to do the same for them. Like me on that long ago plane ride, they will never know why a stranger took the time to extend a hand. But I know that my attempts since then are all because of that little girl. Her offer of a magazine to a tired, scared, and lonely soldier has echoed throughout my life. I have to believe that my small gestures have the same effect on others. And to that little girl, now a woman, I would like to take this opportunity to say again, thank you.
So I don't want you to talk to anyone, just on your paper right now. We will listen one more time, but for now, think, what's the main story? Go ahead and put your notes down. What might you say some side stories are? The stories around the side that you think might be important. What might you say is a hidden story? We didn't see it with our eyes, we didn't hear it with our ears, but this is the hidden story in this man's talk. Put down some ideas, then we will listen one more time before we talk.
In the essays we receive, we find that many recall a single moment when belief became clear. These moments may seem insignificant, but they reverberate afterwards and even become the basis of a life's credo. This is what happened to Miles Goodwin of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a lawyer and Vietnam veteran. On June 23, 1970, I had just been mustered out of the Army after completing my one-year tour of duty in Vietnam. I was a 23-year-old Army veteran on a plane from Oakland, California, returning home to Dallas, Texas. I had been warned about the hostility many of our fellow countrymen felt toward returning non-vets at that time. There were no hometown parades for us when we came home from that unpopular war. Like tens of thousands of others, I was just trying to get home without incident. I sat in uniform in a window seat, chain smoking and avoiding eye contact with my fellow passengers. No one was sitting in the seat next to me, which added to my isolation. A young girl, not more than 10 years old, suddenly appeared in the aisle. She smiled, and without a word, timidly handed me a magazine. I accepted her offering, her quiet welcome home. All I could say was, thank you. I do not know where she sat down or who she was with, because right after accepting the magazine from her, I turned to the window and wept. Her small gesture of compassion was the first I'd experienced in a long time. I believe in the connection between strangers when they reach out to one another. That young girl undoubtedly has no memory of what happened years ago. I like to think of her as having grown up, continuing to touch others and teaching her children to do the same. I know she might have been told to give me the gift by her mother. Her father might still have been in Vietnam at that point, or maybe he had not survived the war. It doesn't matter why she gave me the magazine. The important thing is, she did. Since then, I have followed her example and tried in different ways for different people to do the same for them. Like me on that long plane ride, they will never know why a stranger took the time to extend a hand. But I know that my attempts since then are all because of that little girl. Her offer of a magazine to a tired, scared, and lonely soldier has echoed throughout my life. I have to believe that my small gestures have the same effect on others. And to that little girl, now a woman, I would like to take this opportunity to say again, thank you.
Miles Goodwin is a real estate attorney in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. During the Vietnam War, he was a clerk for the U.S. Army headquarters outside Saigon. Goodwin says it took about 10 years after his discharge before he told people about his service there. As you listen to his story there, what I want you to get into the routine of doing. This is the first time here, so we'll give it a try. Just what would you say is the main story? You know, the story in your face. It was a story about this. What's the main story? But if we want to understand it, we have to start asking ourselves, so what are the side stories here? Some of the things that are around the sidelines that aren't the main story, but they have great affect. And then I want to see if you can push yourself, what's the hidden story? You know, the story we cannot see with our eyes or ears, but that is definitely the story that is there. You have some perspective, your friend has some perspective. The variance is okay. Why don't you turn and talk with your neighbor? What did you think? Name, son. Talk with your neighbors. You can say, what makes you say that?
É bom, vamos pensar qual seria Porque hoje eles são meio injustiçados. Até quando o negócio
Friends, I will So, friends, could we come back together, please? Okay, so I want to just hear a few voices. But what I'm trying to give you is a taste of what a routine is. Okay, so if I have an issue in front of me, if I have an event in front of me, if I have some issue in front of me, one good routine for me to do, what's the main story? What are the side stories? What's the hidden story? Main, side, hidden. Could you share what you said was your main story, and then the side, and then the hidden?
Okay, main story is the girl given the magazine for the soldier coming back from the war.
Okay, and what were you saying side stories were about that?
He was made back home, tired, feeling alone.
Okay, so main story, girl gives man magazine. Side story, loneliness. Coming home after war.
Yeah.
What were you saying, hidden stories?
Hidden, small gestures changing we think about work and life.
Okay. So maybe a hidden story. The small gestures can have big lifelong possibilities.
Yes, and then we also talked about additional points like the girl with a good education from her parents, like helping others.
Okay, the lessons the girl learned can carry forward.
Yes.
That's a side story.
Yes, we talked about that.
Who else had some side stories or main stories? Someone else, thank you. Yeah, please.
We're just about how sad the consequences of a war.
What was that, a side story?
Side story.
The sad consequences of a war.
The discrimination towards soldiers.
The discrimination against the war soldiers coming back.
And how they suffer and psychological consequences.
The psychological consequences of soldiers coming home.
The innocent naturality of the open heart and mind of a child.
Okay, is that a hidden story or side story?
I feel the side story needs to be a hidden.
Yeah, so maybe a potential side story, the innocence of a child, the openness of a child. There's a real side story there. Yeah. Can we hear one other voice? Thank you. What were you adding? One other person. Okay, please. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Talk about motivation of the girl.
So there's a side story. What motivated the girl to make that gesture?
And then also the feeling of the person, that probably what he was going through during war, not just going back home, they make that had.
Okay, so not only his feeling about going home, but his feeling of experiencing war. There's a side story there. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Did someone else have one other idea? Something else? Yeah, please.
I have one hidden story. I thought that maybe he felt guilty about the war and about feeling innocence, and then the girl gave him the idea of giving back to society by helping strangers in some way to compensate the war.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're saying, if I may, maybe there's a hidden story about the guilt of killing the innocent, and now the innocent just gave him something beautiful. Ooh, there's a hidden story there. It's very complex. This is so much more than a story about a man coming on an airplane home, right? There's a lot of layers to this. What I'm just trying to model here, and then we need to close today, giving you a taste of this experience, right? This isn't about getting the right answer here, but it is about looking at things with empathy, looking at things from perspectives, being curious. You know you have a good routine when you can do it in many, 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 many places. If we can only do it one time, it's an activity. But I want you to think, your concept teachers are helping students to have routines. So if you are my students and we are looking at Brexit, what's the main story? What are the side stories? What's the hidden story? If you were my students and we were looking at this is the moment where, okay, a person who never had any political office has the highest office of America. What's the main story? What's the side stories? What's the hidden stories? We may look at this issue, the fight against deforestation in Brazil. Okay, what's the main story? What's the side story? What's the hidden story? Main, side, hidden. Main, side, hidden. This is just one routine, right? Your teachers at Concept have been learning many routines, but we wanted to get you a taste. Maybe some of you tomorrow, wherever you're working, could ask your colleagues, what's the main story? What's the side story of this issue? What's the hidden story, if you will, right? Many of you will see these as activities, but I want you to start seeing this. This is getting our children into the routine of being reflective, being compassionate, looking for connections, perspective seeking. Do you remember our wish list? A wish list is just a wish list until we have some tools to grow it. So the question for us at this school is, what kind of thinking do we want to make routine? And then how can we use thinking routines to help our children get there? There's much more to be said, but our time is finished for today. So on that note, I will turn it back to Escola. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's always an inspiration to have Mark Church with us. So I keep telling him that if he were to say the same thing over and over again, it's still super inspiring to hear him say the same thing over and over again. It's always such a treat to have someone that brings such insight into thinking, understanding, teaching, and learning. And we thank you for taking the time to learn with us. And again, we hope to have many continued sessions for this parent educational learning community. We've had several different sessions throughout the course of the year, and this session marks our October parent educational learning community. So we thank you for your engagement, we thank you for your presence, we thank you for your thinking, and we hope that you engage in other thinking routines with us, and you take advantage of the thinking routines that you're learning to engage in conversation at work and conversations at home. In our weekly learning journey that we send home every week, we tell you what are the thinking routines that we're going to be working with. And you have the opportunity to ask us, can you give me some more information? I want to learn more. Can you teach me some routines? And we will be happy to do so. With that, we thank you. We hope you enjoy some coffee, some pão de queijo, some water, and some cake. And have a fantastic rest of the afternoon. Thank you so much. Thank you.